Our next guest, OJ McDonald, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Give OJ a big round of applause. CEO of Association of Town and City. I'll pass you over there.
Yeah,
we are.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Right. My audio on, can you hear me? Yeah, unlucky for you guys. Bill, I love that presentation. I hate it as well. Love it because it was brilliant. Hate it because I don't know what I'm going to talk about. Because basically, I'm going to tell you everything Bill's just said, but maybe in a different way, because that was absolutely spot on. So OJ McDonald, I'm the CEO of the Association of Town and City Management, membership organisation, which looks after people who manage towns and cities across the UK and Ireland. Stefan is the chair of my advisory council, so he's the one that basically sets our policy agenda, including things like permitted development rights and business rates. So when he said, OJ, come to Norwich, I'm like, I'm there. Don't care how long it takes on the train, doesn't matter. This is my first conference for about 18, 19 months. So I've got a lot to talk about. So we've got a lot to get through. So let's start. There's a lot to get through. So I'm going to be talking about de-anchoring a tale of two crises for the future city. So there's lots of issues we've got to cover. There's lots of things impacting cities today, which will shape what cities look like tomorrow. But I want to focus on just two of them. And Bill has already really articulately outlined what these challenges are. Firstly, we know there's a massive problem in terms of the retail sector, and we know certainly specific sectors are really hit hard. Fashion retail is really up against the cosh with a lot of generational brands which have been around for centuries, which are leaving and are going online, especially Debenhams. You know, I hear we know about the issues of Arcadia as well. I heard the other day that in terms of shopping centres, some of them, their values are down to around about 60, 70%. You know, that's a massive fallout in terms of the retail sector. And this is borne out by some of the statistics, some of the research out there. So PricewaterhouseCoopers, a few months back, commissioned some research from the local data company. It showed that 2020 was the worst year for retail in a decade. Its annual decline was 10,000 stores for multiple retailers, which was worse than any other year. So the question is, what role does COVID have to play in this? Is COVID-19 the real disruptor which has really pulled the rug from the retail sector, or is it just a distraction? Is it something which is only accelerating challenges which are already there? And we've heard lots of people say that, look, COVID is just the icing on the cake. Some of these problems were already there. And I think that's absolutely right. And if Bill said that. When you look at the statistics, when you look at the increase from 2015 to 2020 in terms of the number of stores going out, you come to the figure at 2020 and you think, yeah, it's a massive leap. Yes, COVID is definitely the thing that's really triggered this fallout. But for me, it's this orange bar chart here, which probably says it all. Because when you look at the increase year on year from 2015 to 2020, actually 2020 is quite in line with the increase that's taken place year on year, every year before that. You would not know from that figure, from that graph, that there was actually a pandemic influencing anything at all. These challenges are here. These challenges are going to be here for a long time still. And the retail sector is completely changing beyond recognition for all of the reasons Bill's just outlined. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example of a change which is happening, which, to be honest, for you and me, we probably wouldn't even realise this change exists. How many people know this person? No? No? Oh, I've got one hand up. I've got two hands. Okay, go on. Who is it? It is Ryan. Welcome, everybody, to Ryan. Let me introduce you to my friend Ryan. This is Ryan. Ryan is a YouTube star. Ryan does all of his work on YouTube. He is the face of retail evolution, to those in the know. So for anybody with a young family, and you have kids that have access to a tablet device, they have access to YouTube, you'll probably realise that your kids will probably prefer to watch YouTube than they will BBC. My kids, they don't even know what the BBC is. Sorry. They don't.
Thanks, that's fine.
Okay, fine, great, fine, good.
I don't know either anymore.
Yes, fine. They don't know what the BBC is. They know YouTube. They watch YouTube all the time. Ryan's model is a fairly simple one. Ryan plays with toys on his YouTube channel. That's all he does, plays with toys on his YouTube channel. Kids love watching Ryan playing with toys on his YouTube channel. My kids would rather watch Ryan play with toys than play with their own toys. What the hell is that about? It's crazy. It's crazy. Don't doubt Ryan's methods, though, because toy suppliers realize how popular Ryan is. They realize that Ryan is a new route to market for their toys, for their products. They pay Ryan to play with toys. A kid is being paid money to play with toys. What on earth is going on? Google pays Ryan because Ryan drives a lot of activity on YouTube. Ryan does a lot of good work for advertisers. They love Ryan. They love Ryan so much they will pay him. Ryan's being paid twice over to play with toys. I mean, come on, help me out here. Ryan's world is so popular, it's so popular, he has over 30 million subscribers. It gets worse. Ryan's world on YouTube has it's amassed nearly 50 billion views. I checked this just a couple of nights ago. 50 billion views over the course of Ryan's time on YouTube. That is massive. It is substantial. Ryan has made it big at a time when this brand cannot find a viable place in the market anymore. This is how much the world has turned on its head because of technology. Ryan is worth $112 million. He is not even 10. He is worth $112 million. Ryan, how does that make you feel? Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Ryan is probably the Bill Grimsey of his generation. You know, this is how the sector is changing beyond all recognition. And it's absolutely, and you look right across so many sectors, and it's all upside down. And it's not just about social media. There are so many different instances in terms of changing technology, which has completely changed the game. And things which used to be essential that would drive us into town are now only discretionary. We don't have to go to the shops anymore to pick up our groceries. We can do if we want to, but we don't have to. It used to be essential. A mix of logistics and technology means that retail has been able to continue throughout the pandemic despite the imposing of social distancing. There are things we can do now at a distance. We don't need to be face-to-face to do many of the things we used to. So this isn't just about the pandemic itself. It's actually about the technology that has sat behind the pandemic that has been changing economy and society for a long time. All that's happened is that the pandemic has really brought it to the fore, has really accelerated some of those trends, because some people who were resistant to change before have had no choice. Have had no choice. And so we're definitely living in a new world. And the thing is about these tools, the thing is about this technology, is that anyone can maximize these tools, even a 7-year-old like Ryan. And what it means is that in terms of innovation, in terms of new services, in terms of new ways of living, the next business, with these tools, anybody can create the next big thing. I've spoken to Google's MD, and he tells me that the big thing Google works on is plug-and-play technology, so anybody can pick up a smartphone or a laptop and create an app in their bedroom, which could end up turning the world upside down again. And that means the rate of innovation is not going to slow down. There is no time when things will settle. It will only speed up because of that rate of innovation. So issue number one, and Bill said it already, I think we have an industrial revolution. And it is an industrial revolution everlasting. And it will only continue to speed up change. And at the heart of it, because of this technology, is the way we understand space and place has to change. Because, like I say, all of those things that were once essential are now just discretionary. So how do we shape our towns and cities to fit this new world? And it's not just about retail. Retail is at the forefront of a lot of these changes because of retail being on the front line of consumer behavior and being a really cutthroat sector in terms of competition. So retail has adapted very, very quickly, and it's had to. But it isn't just about retail. Cash is disappearing, and that completely changes the business models of many sectors. You think about what cinemas are going through at the moment. I'm told that it's been even following the restrictions placed on cinemas, they're struggling to get people back into auditoriums again, because there are a lot of movie studios who are going straight to people's homes, streaming big releases with their films, because they have the technology to do so, they have the option to do so. It might be more profitable for them to go through the cinema, but in a time where things are uncertain with restrictions, they don't have to. It's not essential for them anymore. They can cut out the middleman. You think about the way people work in the modern day. The office isn't a necessity. It might be ideal for some people, but it's not a necessity. You think about the ways we communicate. You think about entertainment and gaming. You think about the logistics industry and how you can get produce within minutes to people's doors now. The logistics industry is completely transformed during the pandemic. All of these things are changing, and they change the way we do business. And it's a real challenge for towns and city centres, because urban life is built on density, they're built on agglomeration. And so when you start to unwind some of this ecosystem, then all of a sudden what you have as a whole, it starts to work differently. And so we need to understand that. The town centre, the city centre, is in a fight for relevance. And at the heart of that, we have to understand what our main footfall generators are going to be. For a long time, those who have worked in towns and city sectors have worked on the basis that our main anchors will be retail. The heart of the scheme will be retail, it will be retail-led. And take this, for example. This is Grand Central in Birmingham. I'm a Brummie. This is my city. It's not home at the moment, but I still love it. And Grand Central is fairly new. And at the heart of Grand Central, John Lewis. John Lewis is the hallmark of this scheme. This is the home of New Street Station. So there are millions of people that will pass through this terminal every year. John Lewis is leaving. They'd only been there for a few short years. They're leaving. They're leaving the scheme. That whole scheme, as you can see, is anchored around John Lewis. What do you do with something like that when your main anchor disappears? That takes a complete re-engineering of a town or a city when your main anchor leaves. Because ultimately what you find is, for many of these places, what sits around that anchor has all been shaped by the anchor itself. It's a bit like the star in the middle of a solar system. Take the star out, all of a sudden everything doesn't align anymore. And that's essentially what a lot of cities have to go through. And so de-anchoring is about finding ways to re-engineer our towns and our city centres in a way that is different, in a way that works for the modern age. So the future city needs to think about what the next anchor will be. Before we get there, we need to discuss the second issue. And again, Bill's already mentioned it. And I'm almost reticent now to use terms like climate change, because for me, over the past few weeks and months, my studying of what's happening out there in the world, the term climate crisis is probably much more relevant to now. So just in the past few weeks, there have been far too many extreme weather events for me to mention by name, focus on, which shows you the situation we have at the moment. The first is in the Northwest Pacific region of the US and Canada, in British Columbia. And it relates to a little town called Lytton, which has just 250 residents. So Lytton, on the 28th of June, following warnings that they were going to experience a heat wave, it wasn't just a heat wave, it was a heat dome, which traps heat into a specific area and doesn't release it. On the 28th of June, Lytton broke its all-time record for hottest ever day. And that's a record that had stood for 80 years. On day 2, Lytton broke the record again, second consecutive day. On day 3, Lytton broke the record again, peaking at 49.6 degrees centigrade. Now, just to give you a little bit of background on the climate for Lytton, it's actually not too different to here. Average temperature, 15 to 20 degrees centigrade. It's a really moderate temperature. Touching 50 degrees is an absolute nightmare. There were reports that the weather was going to start to cool down a bit, bringing relief to the residents. But to the residents' surprise, on the night of the 30th of June, they were evacuated. And then the reason why became clear the day after, Lytton burned down because of an uncontrollable wildfire. So there's the pictures of Lytton before and after, and it is a wasteland, so it's not on the map anymore. Lytton is gone, everyone was evacuated. And the reason why this is so scary is because climate scientists have no idea how Lytton managed to not just beat the previous record, but it smashed it by nearly 5 degrees centigrade, so it wasn't even close. It was outside of all of their worst case scenarios. So they're worried, they are concerned. There is panic amongst climate scientists because they know climate change is real, it's unequivocal, and it's human induced. The problem is they don't understand all the ways in which the climate is breaking down, and they think they've missed something because of this. This is not in any of their models, so they're seriously concerned now. The second issue is the Henan province in China, where the city of Zhangzhou was flooded, only a few weeks after Lytton. So this took place between the 20th and the 22nd of July. Zhangzhou, a city of 6.7 million people, it received a year's worth of rainfall in just a few short days. And the result was absolute carnage. And what was particularly scary is how it decimated the infrastructure of a city, especially subways, especially anything underground, road tunnels underground. It was horrific. And the bit for me which is scary about this is that Zhangzhou is a so-called sponge city. It's a modern city. It's not an old city. It's a modern city. And it was apparently built to be resilient to things like heavy rainfall. It clearly wasn't. And so if this is our best attempt to deal with heavy rainfall, there's a lot we've got to do to be prepared for what comes next. The US magazine Nation, which focuses on climate change, says that this is the Zhangzhou precedent. And for them, it's China realizing how vulnerable it is to climate change. I think for us, it's the first realization of just how vulnerable our towns and cities are. So the future city has to confront the climate crisis, there's no doubt. The issues of asphalt and concrete and how that mixes with lots of water is not a good mix. It exacerbates flooding. So in terms of our infrastructure, everything will have to change, and it will have to change quickly. And especially areas near the coast as well. So we have seen the melting of the ice caps, and that's meant a small increase in sea level rises. Now the problem is that a lot of that rise has actually happened between 1971 and 2006. So the rate at which the sea level is increasing is actually accelerating. There's been a further increase since 2006. Now, even worse is that because of greenhouse gas emissions, further increases will happen, and it's already baked in. There's nothing we can do to stop that. That's already set in stone. It's just about how much worse things get from here on in. So if the stats are correct, then carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere are the most they've been in at least 2 million years. And some say it's up to 4 million years. And there was a stat out the other day that said 4 million years ago, the sea was 30 to 40 meters higher than it is today. And so that's the challenge we have when it comes to rising sea levels and for any place on the coast. And we already know it because we already have our first climate refugees in the UK. So Wales, towns in Wales on the coast are already on red alert. And one town they're saying will be decommissioned, they call it, because they're not going to continue to renew its flood defences as of 2050. And so the people of the town called Fairbourne in Wales are now having to look for somewhere new to live because the game is nearly up. So climate change, it's here, it's happening. So and the thing about towns and cities is they are not just the victims of climate change, we are also the main perpetrators. The built environment contributes 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So this is actually within our hands. Most of the work that needs to be done to fight climate change will happen in cities. And so the future city is going to have to adapt accordingly. The city is where the battle on climate change will be won and lost. Now, thankfully, how we deal with the Industrial Revolution is also partly how we deal with the climate crisis. So can anybody guess what I'm trying to say with this image? It's fairly obvious, isn't it? Come on, catchphrase. Go on. You look like you know. Yeah, although I don't want to use the term killing two birds with one stone, because when we're talking about the environment, it's probably not the right term, but yeah, there we go. The same things that help us deal with the Industrial Revolution are the same things that help us deal with the climate crisis. We've worked with a guy called Dr. Neil Jennings at the Grantham Institute for Climate Change at Imperial College London, and he's done a paper which says actually much of what you need to do to make sure cities are resilient for climate change are actually just good business. They're just good business because they increase investment and increase the attractiveness to people in many ways. So there are studies out there which talk about the link between green space and well-being. And we've seen it in practice in towns and cities we work with across the UK. Where green space is installed, the dwell time, footfall, the interest from businesses, the investment, it all goes up. It all goes up. And also green space is really important for climate change mitigation. So it is two birds, one stone. Thanks, Bill, for already mentioning Stockton. So Stockton Urban Park, we've worked with Stockton-on-Tees Council, and it's exactly as Bill says. 2 shopping centres to 1. They will open up the river. They're going to completely clean the river and open this glorious, fabulous space, which will be used as a community hub, which will be used for events. And rather than the businesses be concerned about losing commercial space, they love it. And they're getting interest from other businesses who want to move into the town once this is done. People-centric streets are going to have to be the way forward. There is no other way. We're going to need more active travel. We're going to need to put people first. And creating that good environment is just good business. And looking at issues strategically around connectivity and housing, I think is really important. So this is a plan of Stockport and what they plan to do in Stockport in the west side of the town, whereby they're going to bring new homes, new green space into what is a transport hub for the northwest. Stockport is a few minutes away from Manchester on the train and is also linked to Macclesfield as well, so it's on the main line. What they want to do is they want to make sure people are well connected so they don't need the car anymore. And that's a long-term planning we are going to need to make sure we can make that transition from the car rather than the free-for-all of permitted development rights, which could, frankly, create a mess in some places. And we need to think about resilience. What business doesn't want to be located in an area where the infrastructure is resilient to issues caused by climate change, whether it's melting roads, buckling train tracks, flooded streets? Businesses will start to gravitate to those areas they think provides them with a safe future. So investing in the issues around the climate crisis will support economic growth in the longer term. So the future city must embrace change by bringing forward the solutions which, meet the needs of both an industrial revolution and a climate crisis. And we can start that by thinking about how we re-anchor around green and blue infrastructure. And we need to do it quickly. And that is it from me. Sorry if the last bits of that were a bit scary, but it needs to be said. And Bill said it first. Thank you very much. Cheers.
OJ, thank you very much. Who is Ryan's agent? That's all we want to know, I think. We've heard a lot here about, from OJ and from Bill, when we're talking about, change and adapting and everything like that, really. So there's a lot of adapting and change to happen. I've seen, as I said earlier, the 20 years I've been here in Norwich, I've seen a lot of change, and And it looks like a lot of it's been for the better, but earlier we were talking about how, you know, parts of our retail areas, such as Debenhams, has gone. And what do we do about those places? What do we do about the empty spaces? Of course, we're also looking at you know, the technology issue. Do we start to look at saying, hey, we're not going to have cars anymore? Going back a few years when I did work for the, the BBC, I did do a film about the pedestrianisation of Norwich city centre, very Partridge-esque, but we did look at it. And one of the issues that arose from that was yes, it's lovely to be in a car-free city and to be in pedestrianised areas, and it feels very clean, and the climate feels better. But of course, you then get the people saying, well, what about getting people who are less able-bodied into the city? How do we look at getting people who are elderly into the city? How do we make deliveries into the city? But it's all about changing the entire way we look at things as well, isn't it? So a lot of what we've heard this morning is inspirational, is exciting, it's scary as well. We're talking about the climate crisis, and as OJ said there, we are very much in a climate crisis. We saw the flooding. We also saw the flooding in New York in the subways as well. And all of these things make us very much think about the places we live and the places we work. And what we were talking about earlier as well was about kind of getting people into the city. Bill was talking about events and people having a reason to come to places, because it isn't about going shopping, it's about creating community hubs and having places where people can come and be entertained, and they'll stay and they'll dwell, won't they, OJ, and they'll hang around and spend lots more time in the city, in a town, in an area, because they feel comfortable. They don't just want to go in and do the essential shopping. It's more a question of whether you want to go in there and be part of that area and do something that's interesting. So we've got a few minutes for some questions before we go into our refreshment and our coffees. So obviously we've got Bill and Stefan and OJ here. We can have any questions from you guys that you want to raise from what you've heard this morning. I know it's a lot of information to take in. I found it incredibly engaging, very inspirational, very exciting, and a lot of change to potentially happen in the future. Not just talking about a 3 to 5 year plan, but going ahead 2050 and beyond. Yes. Shall I get him? I can do that if you like. I'll go. Thanks for that. Cheers. It's been my Kilroy silk. Remember, it's Kilroy. Walking around.
I remember Kilroy. When you were talking about other cities and other massive big towns and things, I was up in Manchester recently, and what they've done with the trams is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the transition, the change within Manchester. And I was thinking about when you were talking about reducing cars in Norwich. I know we've got the park and ride, but it seems like the transport systems is a lot of money that's been poured into London, and the transport system is, from my experience, excellent. But when it comes to places like Norwich or some of the other cities, is there money available? Is there consideration for maybe something like a tram system as well?
I'm happy. There are others that are better situated here. I think we would be going retrospectively back to about the 1950s and 60s when the trams were taken out of the city. The infrastructure of the city doesn't lend itself to a tram system, and it's been looked at and reviewed in other times. I think there are probably better solutions to that, and having the right infrastructure within the city to do it. We need a much wider understanding of how the rural lands access the city compared with how the city accesses itself. So that it's easy to cycle and walk when you're in the city, but coming from Cromer or Kings Lynn or Great Yarmouth, how do you get into the city from there? So there are fortunately already programmed in some good conversations on transport between the city, the county and ourselves, and we have done for a long time. It's not as simple as take everything out and put a tram in. It's far more complicated.
No, the tram was just an idea, only because I've seen it in other cities.
Yeah.
It's the whole kind of infrastructure for transport, really.
Yes, the answer is it's a long process to transition across, and the city, county, and others, as Bill has said, work very collaboratively to make sure that works, and we need to make sure it works for all different types of modal use. We need a very effective wider transport system in buses and access, and we've always had issues in the city for the fact that bus services cease at a certain point, so it doesn't always meet the needs of the user, and there are different issues for the city. But I think the aspiration has been said and is mirrored by the business community to make the city as effective and green, and we've just commissioned recently that came to the last bid board, looking at urban greening and how we can have that position. I know when the county just commissioned the work to St Stephen's, all the bus stations on those are going to have sedum roofs and things like that, so you can build the greenification into those systems. Those are things that will help, but we need a longer term plan to create more green space in the city and to make sure that's done effectively for the city.
It's interesting. I suppose we look. Thank you very much. Did that answer your question to a degree? I think as well what Bill was saying earlier with kind of the longevity and looking at the future. So we're not just talking about retrofitting maybe a tram system. We're looking at a completely different mindset. And what's interesting in Norwich is when you see how many people hire these scooters. Some people find them a bit of a menace, but when you think about it, and Bill was saying earlier about leasing cars. We lease cars now, and there will come a point. I know many people I know who live in London, they don't have a car, and when they want a car, they rent a car. They'll hire a car for the important things, don't they?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to add one thing to your question, is that I don't do money, okay? I know it's easy for me to say that, but if you start off with what can you afford, the answer's nothing, so you do nothing. What you need to do is to use your imagination as what the future might have. And I remember speaking to the Cornish council, and I said to them that you're going to have carless towns, and they have this rural thing that you have, okay? And one councillor, she was a bit snobby. She said, I don't think you understand that we rural people have to have a Range Rover in order to get to the town. So it won't happen. And I said, well, if you'd have gone to your people who lived where you live now 200 years ago and said, you won't need a horse, they'd have thought you were mad. And she didn't quite get that, but what I was trying to say is you're mad. You need to, perhaps, Norwich is the nucleus for, I don't know, trams that go to Cromer backwards and forwards, and they're green. I don't know, but unless you start saying, what's the challenge of rural living around a nucleus called Norwich is a brand that does this, which is such a bloody great place to be. And by the way, if we don't do any of this, it'll be under the water in 150 years' time anyway. I mean, that's the conversation that needs to happen. And then I think you'll get people going. So you need to have, won't come from central government, this. You don't rely on the money coming from there. You need to get, this is what needs to happen. Now, how do we fund it? How do we make it exciting for investors to come in and fund it?
So it's very interesting, you talk about the brand as well, having a brand that every city and town should be a brand. And have the reason for people coming to it. Everyone comes to Norwich because they love it anyway, but of course there are other reasons as well. Sorry, so you had a question, Paul? Yes, I was coming to you.
So, a question for Bill and OJ. So, how do you go about funding the creation and then the running of these community hubs and these green spaces within our urban environments?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, first of all, you've got to know how much it is, right? So you need a plan. If you've got a plan that says we're going to buy that shopping centre, blow it up, and reduce it to a green park, cover over the dual carriageway so that we can get to the river and open it up, you need a plan. That's part of that plan. If they tried to fund that based on an internal rate of return, the council wouldn't do it. Okay, because it doesn't give them a return directly for that space. So it has to be part of a holistic plan. So don't start trying to justify individual projects by internal rates of return. Look at the internal rate of return for the business called Norwich. And then, once you know what you think it needs to look like and you cost it out, you can then start to say, what are the benefits that are going to flow from it? And does it justify that little pocket being a green park? Because it brings in what OJ just said. So the reason I don't do money is because if you start with money, you just won't do it. Whereas if you start with the vision of the future, with all of these influences coming in, and then cost it out, and then go to the public and private sectors, and by the way, some of the local people, that have got lots of money, and get them engaged too. Because I think we've lost our way a bit with this celebrity billionaires and, having playthings that go into space and all that kind of stuff when they're still starving kids, We need to recheck as a planet and as a species that these are the things that are important. And I think you'll start to get what you got back in the Industrial Revolution where, Cadbury's built Bourneville for their workers. Are we going to build something for Norwich and Norfolk that helps the climate, that stops it being underwater in 150 years' time? That's the big question. And get the big people involved in it and then come up with a plan and cost it out and get people... it's a big job. But unless somebody starts, like today, it ain't going to happen. It will never happen unless you get inspired leaders that want to try and do it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I think it is important to start with that vision first before you start thinking about the cost of things. But, thinking this through, central government is unreliable when it comes to funds. And something Bill said earlier about towns having to bid for various pots of money is a challenge. It's a challenge everywhere. Now, I think for me, in the ideal world, what we can at least start by doing is that in terms of those funds, things like the town deal, I would like to see now some condition or some criteria which says that any funds from now on being used for towns, high streets, city centres, whatever it might be, has to deal with issues like climate at its centre. If the investment you're making doesn't look at issues around mitigation and adaptation of climate change, forget it, because that's what needs to be done. And so things like green pocket parks should be in there. Things like green and blue infrastructure should be in there. And then that supports the type of environment which people would want to spend time in anyway. But outside of central government, use your imagination, we can go wider. I think especially when it comes to green and blue in our towns and cities, I would imagine there are various parts of the community that would actually like to see their area use that type of infrastructure, especially green space. So thinking around issues such as crowdsourcing various schemes is probably an option in this case, because it's not just something for a specific group. That is something which all the community can enjoy and creates a space which they want to be in. So they are probably much more likely to say, yeah, you know what, I'll chuck a little bit of money at that. So it's worth exploring all the options you have when it comes to a scheme like that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Do you know what? When I was a kid, swimming pools weren't available, right? And my school, my junior school, wanted to build a swimming pool. And I had to take sixpence every week, and I had a card. And all the parents gave their kids sixpence every week to take in. And they raised the money over 3 years to build a swimming pool. And that's revolutionary in 1959. Okay? Today, it can be on a much bigger scale if we all get the issue and we all put hands in our pockets in some way or another. And then we can demand things of government once we've matched it.
Yeah, once the ball gets rolling, as you say, with crowdfunding as well, OJ, that's a very simple way for people to get involved. We've got one more question before we have this gentleman over here patiently waiting. Oh, you got it. You have a microphone. You brought your own.
Yeah, I always take one with me.
Always be prepared.
Dan Skipper from Age UK Norwich. Not to add to the list of already large crises that have been talked about today, but we also have a health and social care crisis. We've got an ageing population. We've got loneliness issues, mental health issues in the country. And one thing we're very good at in this country, but also very bad at, is segmenting issues up. So we look at things from a health perspective, we look at things from a transport perspective. What have the panel seen in some of these sort of flagship areas in the UK and other countries about how those, if you like, political and infrastructural segmentations are sort of taken away to look at things at that city level and have the population, if you like, drive some of those solutions, which I think tech firms do really well. They sort of, the user drives the future rather than the infrastructure. So, welcome any sort of observations there.
Well, I think it comes back to leadership. If you look at Manchester, which has already been mentioned, and you've got a slide about it, Andy Burnham is a heck of a good mayor. Okay, and there's an example of a leader who's prepared to stand up for what's right for Manchester and to get change happen. And he's been on the receiving end of some pretty rough stuff during the pandemic, as you know. Andy Street is the mayor of Birmingham, and the flagship store, of which he was the CEO when he was at John Lewis, closed, and it took his breath away. I mean, he was absolutely shocked. But the fact is, Andy Street, you as the leader have got to have a view that says that could have happened. And I'm saying that to everybody. What are you going to do when those banks go? What are you going to do when this happens? What are you waking up to what the future has in store? And we need leaders to do that. John Lewis, for example, the leader in there, the CEO in there, Dame, can't remember her name. Sharon White, Dame Sharon White. She's not a retailer in my parlance. She gets it, and she's going to have 70 to 80% of her business online, full stop. And the shops that she's going to retain will change. They will become showrooms, and they will become events. They will become places where people go to touch, feel, and experience. And she won't bother about selling stuff out of them or justifying them in their own right. So what I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, we've got to encourage leaders to stand up and take control. Now, there are two ways of doing that. You change the system. So I believe in decentralisation, by the way. I believe that unitary is better than parish, district, county, but I don't think unitary in itself is necessarily the answer. I believe in regional assemblies. I don't believe in Westminster. And I think until we get decentralisation, until we get localism on steroids, and until we get leaders taking that pole position, not to tell people what's going to happen to them, but to get, like you said, to use the high-tech companies to get the people that live there to be a part of what's going to happen, to get that system in place. Then I think we'll see the changes happen. And it'll get funded once the people want it. And by the way, we are moving away from the 20th century of obsession of consumerism. We're waking slowly up to we've got so much stuff to throw away, haven't we? And it's going to change and change again. So it's all about leaders, and whoever your leaders are in Norwich, they've got to make it happen. And are they good enough? If they're not, find some more. Be ruthless.
Did that answer your question to a degree? Yeah, good, fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, I think time has beaten us ever so slightly. We're heading towards 11:10. So we're going to have a refreshment break now. Is that sort of 10 minutes? Is that about 10 minutes-ish? And then these guys are going to be back, so you can ask them some more questions. And we have some more guests joining the panel as well. So about 10 minutes, and then we'll reconvene. That's okay, thank you.
What you need to do is to do a programme and I'll come up.
Okay, everybody, everyone's suitably refreshed and had your coffee break, etc., etc. Thank you for your fantastic questions earlier and sticking with us this morning. As you can see, the panel has multiplied. That's what happens if you turn your back for a minute, like rabbits. I wasn't supposed to move that. Sorry. Anyway, it's lovely to see you all for the second part of this morning's conference. And again, I've been totally taken aback by how much Norwich Bid actually do. I knew a lot of what they did. And the good work they do here in Norwich to promote it and get behind things in events, etc. But I hadn't quite grasped just how much goes on in Norwich, thanks to them. So we're going to hear again from Bill and OJ in a minute. But first of all, this esteemed panel here is going to tell us, they've got about 5 minutes each to tell us a few things. We've got a couple of questions to put towards them. We have Stephen Evans, who's the Chief Executive of Norwich City Council. Raise your hand, sir. There he is. Thank you very much. We also have next to him Tom McCabe, who's the Head of Paid Services and Executive Director of Community and Environmental Services here. Martin Blackwell from Norwich Bid, who's going to be talking about the nighttime economy. We were supposed to be talking to Jo Cox-Brown. She is in Lisbon, and who doesn't want to be in Lisbon? And we were going to connect to her via Zoom, and we're all so used to Zoom now, but it didn't work. So I'm not sure whether she's on another pina colada or whether it genuinely isn't working. Now, sadly, we can't connect to her. But hopefully another time we can speak to her as well. We have Professor Joshua Bamfield from the Centre for Retail Research. Thank you, Professor, for joining us this morning. We have Julian Munson, who's the Head of Enterprise Zones and Innovation at the New Anglia LEP, Local Enterprise Partnership. And at the very end there, Hayley Johnson, who's the Chief Operating Officer of FX Home. And if you don't know who FX Home are, they are the most amazing CGI, would you say, and digital technology. And when I first came to Norwich 20 years ago, I was doing a report for Look East, and they helped animate a lightsaber for me. So for me, as a Star Wars fan, being born on May the 4th, this was the most amazing thing I could ever do. But looking back now, it was very basic, and they've gone from strength to strength. They really are a wonderful success story here in our fine city. So we've got a few questions for these guys. They've got about 5 minutes each. And then we're going to reintroduce Bill and OJ to the panel as well and open it up for more questions after that. So the questions are, and I know they're very well prepared for this, and we'll get very well. Tom, I saw you scribbling earlier. What the hell am I doing here? Very well prepared. Don't take the wind out of my sails. So basically, the questions are: what will Norwich City Centre look like in 5 to 10 years? We know how we hope it will look. And what are going to be the main challenges to the businesses in that city centre, and what opportunities are going to be presented as a result of those challenges? We'll go in this order, if that's okay. Stephen, rather well versed at this, over to you. Are they being timed? Are you being timed, aren't they? Yeah, being timed. I think.
Okay.
Against the clock, away you go.
Thanks, everybody. It's really good to be here and to just see everybody in person. And like others have said, I think it's probably the first event a lot of us have been to in 18 months. So the question, just looking at that 5-year horizon, 5 to 10 years, will the city look radically different in that time frame than it does today? Possibly not. I share a lot of what's been said. I don't think Norwich is a city in crisis, but for me, it's how do we hang on to what people love about the city, and how do we make the bits that need to be made better? How do we make them better? The longer term vision, I think, is a different story, and I think we need to recognise that a lot of what Bill and OJ have said, I think, is coming, and I think we need to get ahead of the game on that. But I certainly don't see a city centre which is broken or is in need of emergency repair. But times are changing, and we need to evolve. I think we possibly are likely to see some consolidation of retail, and that will have that will change potentially the shape of the city centre. I share the concerns about permitted development from a city council perspective. Some high-profile areas of poor quality housing from permitted development, retail into resi, and we've had to fight through the courts because we've got to protect our residents from poor quality housing. So I think we're speaking on one voice to the government on that one, and let's see if things change. Community hubs, I think, are going to be really important. A place where different groups can come. Norwich is an amazing city. It's a young city, 33 median age, and a community feel, and how can we create those community hubs. I think there's an opportunity for the City Council and how we use City Hall, a building at the heart of the city, moving to a hybrid working model. How can we use that asset to better serve the city, not just as an office for myself and colleagues, but actually can we turn City Hall into a community asset? The big thing for me, what sets us apart from other cities, particularly in the region, is arts and culture and heritage. And that's got to be our calling card, and that has got to be at the heart of our recovery. And that is a massive part of what sets us apart. And for me, having been chief executive for 18 months, that's what I've missed. You know, my predecessor said, you know, you'll be invited to things every day of the week, and for obvious reasons that hasn't happened. It's so great to see the city and the events start to come back to life, but actually I think that is a big part, that's a massive part, and that's got to be front and centre. How we blend heritage with more modern other culture and more modern, the arts scene, music, how we market the city to appeal to a more diverse audience. You know, let's not, the cathedral is absolutely great, but actually there are other images of the city which I think we need to promote a bit more. For me, it's about how we create that environment for people to come and spend time here and to dwell. And I think that gets us into discussions about transport. And I agree with a lot of what's been said around the future of cars. And I think there's a lot of changes happening in the city. Transport schemes divide opinion. Wherever you are in the country, you get a division, pretty much 50-50, 50% in favour, 50% not. I think thinking about the challenges, there's both a challenge and an opportunity there. Transport is a big challenge. I live 3.5 miles exactly from my front door to City Hall. I cycle in pretty much every day. The first mile of my journey, I have to say, I feel like I'm taking my life in my own hands. Once I get into the city boundary, it's much better. I'm an experienced cyclist, spent 10 years cycling through London. Would I let my kids cycle? No. So we need to fix that. That's a massive challenge. Trying to get public transport 3.5 miles away to the city centre is not a good experience. These are big challenges which we need to work together to fix. In terms of opportunities, we're all passionate about the city. That binds us together. So I think that's got to be our building block. I think what we've seen, I think an opportunity and a benefit of COVID is that partnership working, coalescing around a shared vision has been advanced by years, perhaps a decade, and I think we've got to hold on to that. There's been a changed mindset, and it's up to us now not to waste that opportunity. Levelling up, whatever that means from government, it's looking like it's more about physical infrastructure than social infrastructure, so we need to grab that. Agree with what's been said about bidding funds, but let's grab that. Technology is coming, and how do we start to build that into our future vision? And I think we've got a strong 2040 vision for the city, but actually now I think we need a really strong 20-year vision for the city centre, which recognises all of these drivers that we've spoken about this morning. So I'm over my 5 minutes, but actually I think there's a huge amount of opportunity and to build on what we do well. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you. Okay, Tom McCabe, over to you, Tom.
Thanks very much, Stephen. A quick plug, Transport for Norwich, a strategy is out for consultation as we speak. Zero carbon, less congestion, support in the economy, opportunity for people to give us views until the 8th of October. Some initial responses ranging from far too draconian to it isn't going far enough. So the views probably not a great surprise. The question, how should the city centre look in 5 to 10 years? I'll major on transport deliberately. It's come up in various conversations. Previous bid conference, our host, who works for the other channel, asked me if we'd see electric buses in Norwich. And my answer, that was only 3 years ago. It was a conditional, long-term, fairly nervous, yes, we will do. But things have moved on. We've bid, 3-4 times for government grants. One of Bill's points, we've fallen short each time. But now, rather than it being a long-term aspiration, I'm really frustrated that we can't make that leap and that change now, and that will happen in the not too distant future. So one thing to my first point is going to be around electric vehicles, on-street charging points, electric buses, even autonomous vehicles. That's one thing that we're going to have to get our heads around and respond to. A second thing is going to be around shared mobility. Norwich was the UK's first sharing city. We have shared data, knowledge, information. We've got world experts out at UEA around all of that. And shared travel is, again, one of those next steps for us. We have the Norwich Car Club, which, again, is one of the exemplars and one of the first groups of people to do it in the country. And my second point is around that app-driven shared transport. What's the future of public transport? I don't necessarily think it's the big, heavy, expensive trams, but as Bill said, the information that we have in those phones linking to whatever to get vehicles to where we need to be and understand what your way to take us on our way in a very quick way. The limits are going to be our imagination. Are we going to be brave enough? Limits are going to be around regulation, because actually we've got great bureaucracy in this country to make sure we don't move too quickly or in too radical a way, and our willingness to adopt the new technology and make it work for us. So the second point there, as I say, around that app-driven shared transport. People have talked about that human personal streetscape. David in his introduction talked about Norwich being a destination. We need our streets, our squares, our footpaths to be welcoming, a place people want to come to work in, to visit time and again. As Stefan said, reimagine the spaces. Norwich is a premier European city, and we need a streetscape to complement the quality of the offer. And that's my third point, high aspiration for how our place looks. I can talk about low carbon or zero carbon logistics. How do we get that last mile or 2 miles or 3 miles in with all this, people like Bill, you're messing it up so that everything's coming from far, far, far away, and we've got all the lorries. We have to rethink that within the city. We have to adopt our workplaces for the changes, so around showering, cycle, car clubs. What is it that our workplaces have to do to complement how it is we're living? And then the last one is going to be around behaviour changes in attitudes. Less reliance on personal cars. I own my car. How big am I? More emphasis on mobility. A car is a way to get us from A to B. If we go to London, as someone mentioned, you get the train, you get the tube, you walk the last half mile, and you can do that. We need to have that confidence that you can get around Norwich without owning necessarily your own car. Get around Norfolk without owning your own car. E-bikes, e-scooters. We've, since the Burrell scheme launched last year, 850,000 kilometres travelled by on those shared personal transport. 85% of our vehicles in the city centre are single occupant cars. We do have to change that. And my final point is, it's not about our generation. We've had our time to a lesser or greater extent. The new generation, like that young chap on YouTube, that is the future. If we're the decision makers, how can we open our minds to some of the possibilities and encourage our young people to be involved and help shape what it is we do? Thank you, David.
Tom, thank you very much. Brilliant. Lots of good points there. Martin Blackwell from Norwich Bid on the nighttime economy.
Thank you. So on your agendas, it says it's Joe Cox-Brown. Joe is in Lisbon and can't get a connection, can't join us. So I'm going to present some of her notes and some of my own thoughts around the evening and nighttime economy. So asking about what the city will look like in 5 to 10 years, I think it will be perhaps a tighter city centre, but a draw for those experiential activities which people have mentioned this morning. We've been talking about experiential activities for a while, but what does that mean? It's events, it's leisure and culture. I don't think we perhaps get to the Stockton-on-Tees example of 96 events a year, but we do run a lot of activities that will draw people in. One of my favourite stories going back many years is in Ulverston in the Lake District, where they thought nobody knows what we are and what we do, and they commissioned with some sponsorship a major branding company who usually work with a McDonald's or a BMW to look at Ulverston and said, what can we do? They decided to make themselves the capital of the Lake Districts for events. My favourite one they come up with, they were going to have a different festival every month. And they looked at the Palio in Italy, which is this horse race around a marketplace, decided actually health and safety probably wouldn't allow us to do that, so they have a pantomime horse race every year. So, you know, maybe that's one idea we can throw out there and put some different events on. But there will be more people living in the city centre, but less people necessarily working in the city centre. So there will be a change, and I think for the evening and nighttime economy, particularly the nighttime economy, there'll be a shift away from the 18 to 30 group to try and appeal to a much wider demographic and age demographic. So what are the challenges that we're facing? So there is this retail versus hospitality thing at the moment. I don't think it is a competition. I think it's about trying to be as flexible as we can with the space. But I completely agree with our other speakers that permitted development rights is a major issue. And I'm sure Joshua might have a view on that as well. Tourism. We do have Visit Norwich under the bid umbrella, and we're developing a new brand called Invest Norwich. So I think, you know, tourism has a huge potential for us, although we do get huge numbers of visitors as we speak. But one of the other challenges, I think, for this sector is technology, and how do they use it to engage with their target audience. How do we create a Ryan, if you like, for the leisure sector, the evening and nighttime economy that engages with people? We've actually put funding application into the Community Renewal Fund to government. And I think one of our speakers also said that, I don't know if you used the word untrustworthy, but unreliable, I think, was the, unreliable was the phrase. So we put our funding application in, and the government told us we'll tell you by the end of July, and at the end of July they said actually we'll tell you by the end of August, and by the end of August they said we'll tell you by the end of September. So we're still waiting to see whether we got some funding, but that would be to work with this community and the other communities, traders, to improve their skills around uses of technology. And the other big challenge, I agree with Bill, is still Brexit, is still up there. There was a survey done, and 60% of businesses in the evening and nighttime economy, leisure and hospitality and culture, said that EU workers were critically important to their business. And of course, we do have a freedom of movement issue. I have recently travel to another EU country, and when I landed, I went through the airport, and I was walking up to the passport control, and my daughter, who was with me, tugged my sleeve and said, "You can't go through that gate, that's EU citizens." Oh yeah, okay, so you know it's still an issue. And of course, with culture particularly, there's a whole loss of international exchanges, which really did, you know, some amazing work, and loss of funding. The Creative Europe programme itself directly funded 68 million euros worth of projects between 2014 and 2020. That's now gone. We're waiting to see what the new funding regime in the UK will look like. But there are opportunities, although I think we probably need to move fast to stay ahead of the game. And luckily enough, the creative sector are really good at innovation. That's what they do. They are creative. So finding ways to work with the people in that sector to look at the whole aspect of what we do with our city centre, I think will be important. I think we will need to transform more of our high street space into creative hubs and open workspaces, that type of thing. But the creative industry sector itself has been the fastest growing sector in the recent years, between 4 and 6% growth, which outstrips most other things. So just to finish on a couple of things that Bill mentioned, he talked about localism, and we've set in place a series of district dialogues. We've had a couple, and starting next week, please look at our website. We split the city down into districts. We are having roundtable discussions about what's important to you in your district, about where you work and how it can be improved. In terms of the leadership, well, the BID is trying to help in that area in all sorts of ways. We get involved in the Norwich City's 2040 vision. A splinter group for that is that there is a climate change group, which I'm involved in. So we're really engaged there. And the green spaces in particular, I'm currently running an Upcycle Your Waste European project. This is our last go at European funding. So next year we will be piloting ways to collect waste from businesses and upcycle it into useful products. So our recent ecothon we had in the city centre brought forward some fantastic examples of that. And as Stefan mentioned at the beginning, the Urban Greening Project, we worked with the UEA to commission a piece of research to look at how could we bring urban greening into the city. It's got some fabulous ideas. It went to the board a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be talking to the City Council and others about how we can all collaboratively work to bring this urban greening agenda forward. So those are my opportunities. Thank you.
Martin Blackwell, thank you very much. Now, Professor Bamfield from the Centre for Retail Research. Joshua, thank you.
I'm very glad to be here. Continuing the sort of ecological line, I must admit that I walked here this morning, so I hope this is true of the rest of you as well. At the Centre for Retail Research, we're a national organisation, and we forecast for major retail and retail supplier across the UK, Western Europe. We've even done a bit of China, and we certainly do North America as well. Most of our work is producing statistics that people can use to fit into their plans or to think about the future. I think the sessions that we've had so far, and I hope this session is going to be the same, has been visionary, interesting, thought-provoking. I'm perhaps, as an economist, a licensed person to be negative and to say, yes, but. And so I want to say some yes, buts as well as the positive things. First of all, I think it's great that Norwich is actually doing so well in reviving after the pandemic. Many cities, Birmingham, London, Manchester, are doing much worse than Norwich. And according to the figures that are coming out, the retail and hospitality sales in Norwich are really pretty much back to what they were 2 years ago. We've not done that research, that centre for cities, but nonetheless, it does show that we are in Norwich part of the leading edge. One thing I do think, though, is that we actually don't have 5 to 10 years to plan. I think we've got 3 to 4 years to plan. So, and those 3 to 4 year plans are going to be done now. So we've got to do it right. We haven't got any time at all to fiddle around saying, well, let's do that, and let's worry about the Green Party and all that and all that sort of thing. I do read the local newspapers as well as The Economist and the Financial Times. So it's very important that there's a lot of planning involving all the stakeholders to move this forward. One of the issues I think we have at the moment is we're looking at sort of retail and hospitality, is that the statistics that come out often have no sort of common basis. So one of the sort of known unknowns is, will there actually be a city centre at all, a retail city centre. Obviously, there will be a hospitality city centre and a health and beauty and wellness city centre. But will there be any shops at all with the growth online? And if you listen to what people were saying in the early part of this year, where something like between 40 and 42% of non-food was being done online in January and February, and something like sort of 13% of food, that, you know, it's an irresistible trend. If we go back 10 years, obviously online had 9% of retail sales, and in 2019 it was up to 19.1%. Our estimate this year, and this year, of course, because of all those 4 months of lockdown, is that it'll be about 30%. But next year, we're expecting a drop in online. And just to sort of pull this out, if we look at online food, and we look at the sort of year to date, it was 11.2% year to date, but now, so when I say now, August, it was only 10.1%. Similarly, in non-food, 29.5% year to date from January to August, between 40 and 42% at the beginning of this year, but last month it was 21.6%. So I'm not trying to say that the growth of online has stopped. Obviously, it hasn't stopped, but that there are plenty of opportunities. You know, the game is not just for Amazon and for the online parts of existing retail businesses. There's a lot of opportunities. Just as the fact that the collapse of Debenhams and Arcadia, very sad for the people who worked in them, but for people who want to sell clothing, obviously it's a tremendous opportunity. Just as Dixon's Currys benefited from the collapse of Comet some years ago, so non-food clothing companies can do well out of that. And the way in which retail will change will presumably provide more opportunities. So the growth of online means that there are too many shops, and so we can expect fewer shops in Norwich, as in other places. But obviously, some of them will be converted to coffee shops, restaurants, some to offices, and some to houses. Like the rest of the panel, are very much against the permitted development rights, but let's hope that a part and parcel of coming to terms with the fact that high streets are essential to most cities, will be the ditching of that proposal. But I think the future is multi-channel, and we have to work on the basis of it being multi-channel. So a smaller central area. I think we need to look much more towards independence. We carried out some research, and other people have carried out research into how many people in the pandemic thought, I need to change my life, I want to set up a business. We found that about sort of 8% of people were saying that. Other people have said more, others less. Obviously, of that 8%, probably only half will get around to doing it, but some of them will want to open shops and hospitality units. And the point about independence, if I may be rude to multiples for a moment, is obviously they're tied to the community, they're geared towards the community. They not only know about it, but it's got to succeed, because they're not sort of anonymous shareholders. They want to make it work. In addition, I think that when people go shopping, particularly in a new area, they want to see different shops, and they like the idea of shopping in independent shops. Some friends of mine, I met them last week, and they expressed how much different Norwich was to what they thought it was going to be, and they liked the number of independent shops that they'd not seen on any other high street. Pop-up shops, to me, I'm glad we haven't heard about them because they're not a strategy. They're, if you like, an introduction to a strategy. I feel that we need to have shops of different sizes so people can start with small units and then, if you like, as trainer units, as they become more successful, they can then take over other shops. I think also we don't want as many large shops as we've got, and we need to rethink places like St Stephen's and other streets that are very dependent on large shops. All this costs money, of course, and it could well be that part of the future is that we have shops within shops, that people traditionally have got, retailers have got a large shop and they let as a concession a small trader who's just starting off, or some other compatible retailer, or hospitality, and that can be successful as well. So I think what we need in Norwich is a variety, lots of different types of shops, lots of different sizes of shops, which are useful for the future development. Because after all, many of the large retailers, as we've seen and as Bill has mentioned, they'll be gone. I remember when Marks Spencer was not only one of the largest, if not the largest retailer in Britain, but it was one of those where people wanted to know about how to run a business. Oh, we'll get the book on Marks and Spencer's, or here's a new strategy for Marks and Spencer's. Oh, how exciting that can be! I remember going to seminars and hearing about how Marks Spencer were introducing these wonderful new suits, where the top and the bottom, you could, if you're a fat bloke, you could buy, a big pair of trousers and a small jacket, if that worked for you. And they were made by, not by a clothing manufacturer, but by a fabric manufacturer. So this was the idea. So the future, as always, will look very much like the past. Yes, we've got to be interested in green and climate, but as somebody who got into economics through meteorology, I wanted to be a meteorological forecaster. When you go out there and you look up there and say, that's air and so on, tomorrow that air may well be over the Netherlands, and the day after it'll be over Germany. So the fact that you've purified the air here doesn't actually mean that Haysborough is not going to be under attack anymore, or that Norwich is not going to suffer either being burnt to the ground or torrential rainfall. It's a global matter, by which I don't mean it doesn't matter what happens here. Yes, we've got to play our part, but the idea that people are looking to Norwich for leadership in that respect, I think is wrong.
Absolutely.
Two more
I'm
points.
going to have to stop you there, Professor, because we've probably done about 10 minutes. I do apologise. And you actually probably going into the profession you're in is easier than forecasting the weather, because my colleagues find it very difficult at times to get it right. And bearing in mind, they told me I was going to have a fabulous week in North Norfolk. They got it completely wrong. But thank you, Professor. Round of applause, please, for Professor Bamfield there. Thank you so much. Sorry, time is against us. Hello? Yes? Oh, sorry. Yes, right. It's not Tess. We are talking to Julian now, I think. Julian next. Is he there? There he is.
There we go.
Julian,
Brilliant.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julian.
Morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I'll start with actually a couple of confessions to make. So firstly, I'm also an economist. Thank you. But I'll try to stay very positive and not talk too much about theoretical models for today anyway. And secondly, I'm a lifelong Ipswich Town Football Club supporter. So that's my confession. So sorry, but nobody's perfect. But I mean, there's a reason why I mentioned that, because I'm from North Suffolk actually, and I'm here in Norwich because I am drawn to Norwich, and have been throughout my life. I was actually a UEA graduate as well. worked in Norwich. My first job was actually at Norwich City Council when I sort of cut my teeth and started my career. So I've had a lifelong experience with Norwich, a very positive one. And I think it's important to recognise the role that Norwich has as a regional centre in pulling people in from across Norfolk, from Suffolk and further afield. And there's some great initiatives to kind of link Norwich to Cambridge as well, like the Cambridge-Norwich Tech Corridor. And I think there's an interesting trend that's going on in the UK, which probably hasn't been touched on today. So I'm going to try and fill in the gaps in my next sort of 4 minutes to try and cover the bits that haven't perhaps been covered in any detail. And I think there's an opportunity to kind of position Norwich as attracting firms decentralising out of London, for example. So, you know, you've got places like Brighton and Cambridge are very attractive locations that businesses from London have been moving out to, and there's no surprise that rents in Cambridge, in the city centre of Cambridge, have risen by 37% over the last 5 years, and that's often driven by the demand of London-based companies looking to decentralise. They can still have a city centre location in the centre of London, but they're looking to actually move closer to where their staff are often located. And I think the global pandemic's actually accelerated that trend, people wanting to be working in a more flexible way and firms supporting their staff in working in a flexible way. So I do think over the next 5 to 10 years, there'll be a significant opportunity for Norwich to kind of, you know, as part of the investment sort of promotional work to kind of reposition itself to attract some of those companies that are looking to have regional bases in places like Norwich, in attractive locations like Norwich. The second part to that is the opportunity for supporting local people into starting up their own business. And again, this was touched on earlier, but I think we've got, I don't think it's been mentioned today, we've got 2 fantastic universities in Norwich, the University of East Anglia and Norwich University of Arts. And they're pushing out, you know, a lot of talent every single year, you know, creative people that are often living, working in Norwich, often want to stay in Norwich, but necessarily can't stay in Norwich because there aren't the jobs for them that actually meet their sort of career path. So they end up in non-graduate jobs or they end up moving away. So I would like to see, you know, a positive push over the next 5 to 10 years to create, you know, opportunities for those graduates locally and trying to support companies, particularly in the creative digital sector. I think there's a lot of opportunities. We're a highly creative city, and I think there's significant opportunities to kind of really push that as part of our brand value. The third area, which relates to that, is also these kind of idea of collaborative workspaces. And this is kind of somewhere between people, you know, living in a place and commuting into another city like London. And we do have people, obviously, prior to the pandemic, who are getting on the early train from Norwich Station, heading into London each day. It certainly wouldn't be for me personally, but people were doing that. They're now sort of in a space where often people are actually working from back rooms. Like myself, I've been 18 months in my back room, and you know, there's a couple of colleagues I haven't actually met in the physical world yet. I've only seen them flat on a screen. And I think there's somewhere in between there where these kind of hybrid collaborative workspaces, which are sort of popping up in a lot of cities across the UK at the moment. I know there are plans as part of the Norwich plans, sort of the Norwich Town Deal Board have got plans around sort of a digital hub in Norwich, and I think, you know, we should really get behind those kind of opportunities to create these collaborative workspaces. It might be in one of the shopping centres, for example. I know that, you know, the Grafton Centre in Cambridge is looking to attract maybe even life sciences firms into a shopping centre. You know, we've got to think differently about how we use kind of retail space at the moment for supporting other sectors and the growth in other sectors. And my final point I just wanted to sort of touch on is kind of the environmental value that could be created by cities going forward. I mean, as you know, I work for the Norfolk and Suffolk sort of enterprise partnership, so we're talking a lot about clean growth, you know, and what the role of Norfolk and Suffolk has in the sort of drive to net zero. And I do think, I agree with the earlier speakers about cities having a really important role to play in creating not just economic and social value, so it's kind of for businesses and for communities, but also environmental value. And we might even get to the space where we've got mini urban farms, or growing vegetables on roofs, or even creating hydrogen production within the city centre or within Norwich itself to fuel the buses that will connect communities in Norwich and further afield in the rural areas as well. So I think there's going to be a radical shift in the way we think about the green economy, and I think Norwich has a really important role to play in that going forward. So I hope I haven't.
Julian, thank you very much. Brilliant, thank you. And Hayley Johnson, Chief Operating Officer from FX Home.
I'm going to stand up so you can see me from over there. So first things first, I was so excited when I got the invite to come and join today. Didn't actually realise I was then going to get invited to come along to the panel, but very, very thankful to be here. So I am someone that loves Norwich. I love everything about it. And similar to a lot of people of my age, at 19 years old, I joined Norwich Union. So iconic business, and I grew up there. You know, I worked there until into my 30s, and then was lucky enough to be able to experience startup businesses, and was part of a business called EPOS Now for 5 years, and saw huge opportunities coming into Norwich for businesses to be able to grow and expand, and that's why I wanted to come today, to be able to represent the business community. So a little bit about us to kind of share with you, I guess, why I think today is a fantastic event. So FX Home are a creative software company, as you heard, and we've grown really quietly over the last 20 years. And our 5 to 10 year plan changed dramatically this year, not because of COVID, but because we were actually acquired. So we were acquired by a company called Artlist, who are based in Israel. Now, why did Artlist choose FX Home to acquire, and why did they choose Norwich to be able to invest in? So our team and our business have done fantastically to be able to grow over that 20 years. We've got 6.4 million users globally, so quite attractive for a company to come and buy us. But what Artlist are struggling with is that they're based in Tel Aviv, and Tel Aviv has a huge war on talent. They've become the San Francisco of the world. And so they physically cannot recruit in Tel Aviv to be able to grow their software team. And so what Artlist discovered was that, there's a much wider world out there in terms of software companies. They needed to be able to grow a software arm. So rather than try and build that themselves, why not go and buy a business that's doing that already? So FX Home is now part of a group that have raised £46 million in investment. They will continue to raise. They've got high ambitions to be able to take the business to IPO, and we're going to be part of that. And so, they've chosen this town of Norwich to be able to grow that software arm. So we have 25 people today. Over the next 2 years, we're going to see that grow to nearly 200 people. So really, really exciting times for Norwich to be able to then be part of that. Sorry. Excuse my terrible graphics. I'm hoping Josh, my boss, never actually watches this back, because he'll never forgive me for the terrible graphics that I put on here. But what could the future of Norwich actually look like? Now, I think we're so lucky to be able to be in the community that we have. We've mentioned today some of the events, like the Sync event that we had, which supported the upcycling. I see familiar faces around here where, we have got this community that can absolutely work together. The fact that we've got the £25 million investment is really exciting. We're going to be able to use that to be able to bring tech businesses together. And it gave me great comfort when I met with Chris Sargison from Chamber of Commerce, and he talked about the fact he doesn't want that being the council's money. That can't be a group of people that are perhaps not connected to how that money should be spent. He wants it to be local businesses that are working together to be able to understand how we use that money and use that money well. Because for any business, not just us, we are going to have a tough time being able to grow our business to the amount that we need. We're going to have a huge war on talent. And it's going to be no good if we're fighting each other for the same people. We need to be able to find a way to attract more and more people to be able to come to Norwich and want to stay in Norwich. I think, when we also look at things like Tech East, we've got a great community there of people that can really help us too. So being able to tap in and make sure that we're using people like that to be able to help attract other businesses. Artlist have chosen to grow their business in Norwich. Other businesses will do that too. We've already seen some fantastic success stories for the likes of Foolproof. We don't really talk about that much to be able to celebrate that a company in Norwich was acquired in that way. And and we'll see more. You know, EPOS now, I believe, will go to IPO. It'll be a great success story for Norwich. We've got Developing Experts that has grown massively through the pandemic. You know, that's one of our businesses in Norwich that will also see huge success and probably go for a big sale. We've got the likes of Snoop, we've got Scribe. You know, there's some businesses that we should be really proud of, that they should be helping us to be able to get Norwich on the map. I think it's, you know, going to be that challenge of being able to make sure that we can actually give the wider world, or the wider of the UK, reasons to be able to actually consider Norwich as an option. You know, I grew up in a time where everybody was thinking, what city am I going to go to? You know, where am I going to move to be able to start my career? Well, why can't people think, I'm going to go to Norwich? You know, I want to be in a tech role, and so therefore I'm going to go to Norwich and I'm going to go and start my career there. You know, and if businesses can work together to be able to help create a lot more of those opportunities, and get people excited about the fact that this is a place that they can come and, you know, and live and make their career, you know, and it changes their life. You know, I've got friends that chose to go to London. They don't own a house. You know, they don't bring their children up in the fantastic way that I'm able to, because I chose to stay in Norwich. But it's not going to be easy. So, you know, we do need to have a serious investment in office space around Norwich. I'm currently trying to find, 15 square foot for us to be able to grow into. I can't find it. You know, and that's a sad place to be, that, you know, I'm looking around office space and can't find suitable office space to be able to grow. So we definitely need to, you know, as everybody said today, really invest in the space around. We need to invest in the skills shortage. You know, we've got to be able to make sure that we're able to grow our own. You know, we can't just rely on recycling the same people. So we need to make sure that we're doing that. And certainly, you know, we've talked today about the transport links. I didn't walk in today. I drove today, and it took me 50 minutes to get from Tavorham just to get here. You know, and that's the challenge that we have all the time. So we definitely do need to consider those transport links more effectively, and really considering those remote areas. You know, there's lots of people that live in Cromer and Sheringham. They don't even consider coming to work in Norwich, you know, because it feels too much of a hassle. So I think, you know, we definitely do need to find a way to reach out to those more remote areas. And, you know, the toughest thing is changing perception. You know, we're not a sleepy city. We're not somewhere that people come and retire to. You know, we're somewhere that people should be flourishing. And, you know, I think that's the bit we've got to really work to change that perception and make people want to come here. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. I like that. It's about changing perception, isn't it? But you've quietly grown over 20 years to be successful. Is that a Norwich thing, or is that a British thing? I'm not sure. Where we kind of grow in the background, and then all of a sudden, hey, here we are, and acquired by a company in Israel. And as Hayley was saying there, you know, 200 people that wanted to kind of be part of that growth. And it's about attracting talent, isn't it? About keeping talent here as well. And of course, if you've got great talent in a place, then it is attractive to other people as well, because other creatives want to join other creatives and form that community. But I think this gentleman said earlier, it's all about everything being connected, isn't it? And being joined up. So we make sure that everything is together. So all of these different headings we have, transport and infrastructure and retail, it all comes together, does it? Green spaces. Green spaces can be attractive to us because it keeps people in the city to spend money, but also it's good for our mental health as well. Right then, so should we have some questions? There's a panel of, amazing panel here, so use the opportunity wisely. Anyone got any questions you'd like to put to any of the panel here, or OJ and Bill from earlier as well? So we've got lots of, you know, a bit of time to kind of have some questions now. Are you too hungry? Yes. Carol, thank you.
Presentations from everybody and a great mix of proposals and ideas. I just want to pick up on the last point that Hayley was making about skills, because all of this needs to be driven by skills, and how are we placed to develop those skills for the future. And I was also just touching on that as well. I think somebody mentioned, well, there'll be more people living in the city centre, but more jobs, fewer jobs in the city centre. So how's that going to balance? And is that actually right? Or because we've got to have some economic drivers within this as well to make it all happen.
If people are going to live in the city, they've got to have somewhere to work, haven't they? As
Exactly.
we were hearing earlier, you know, Norwich Uni or Aviva, far fewer people working actually in the city, and you've got to have a reason to come into the city if you're working as well. So who wants to pick up on that point then? Tom.
Just on skills in the first instance, you perversely moving into a place where there will be more jobs in the United Kingdom than there will be the people to do them. And that's a great opportunity, but it shows the importance of the skills. Norwich is you in well behind the regional and national average for skills, so we know we've got a gap, a big gap to close. We've also got, as Hayley mentioned, some great institutions, but our schools and our colleges, we've got to work collaboratively and not compete with each other, so that we have those centres of expertise. And it's Julian's point around the skills for tomorrow, the green tech, the future skills, rather than throwing people out with yesterday's skills. So a huge job to do, a lot of collaboration needed, but also I would say business has got to step up there and bang on the door of the colleges and the education providers to ensure the people who are coming out are what it is that's required. They won't just turn up by chance. It's got to be people working together on that.
Absolutely. Is that happy with that, Colin? Yes. It's a huge subject. I think that the one thing that's come out of this is just how huge all the subjects are. And we can talk about business, we can talk about individuals, we can talk about institutions, we can talk about universities, we can talk about regenerating the high street itself. Any more questions?
I've just got something to add on the housing.
Sorry, OJ, yes.
The issue on housing and how it works in terms of people being able to access their businesses. Now, this is a really big question, and it ties in with a lot. I think, like the guy over there said earlier, there's different things which, when you look at the context of place, it all comes together in one area. And I think the issue of housing, employment, skills, also the issue of climate change, in this case, all come together. One of the easiest things cities can do to solve the climate crisis, but also have skills on their doorstep, and create an economy which is resilient to things like a pandemic, is to have good housing co-located with good businesses. And then all the issues around transport capacity and public transport, a lot of that will just go away. Because if people have good employment on their doorstep, they'll just walk. And it takes away so many of the pressures if we're able to build places with great homes and great employment opportunities co-located together. Unfortunately, one of the challenges we have is we don't necessarily have the system that makes that work well. So we've already discussed the issues around business rates. We know a lot of businesses are in debt because of the pandemic. So there might be businesses, unless the government steps up, we will lose. The issue of permitted development rights, on the face of it, allowing space to be turned into residential, you would think, allows us to have that co-location of residents and businesses. But my fear is because it's effectively a free-for-all, and there's no real barrier for rogue landlords to be able to evict used commercial businesses using commercial space, you may actually find that some of those employment drivers end up on the outskirts of the city being relocated, and what you effectively get is a donut. There's no way to control it. It is completely uncoordinated. And so being able to shape that space where you have good residents and business space co-located becomes almost impossible unless you have the likes of your council, your bid, or the partners all working together to shape the area accordingly. So that's the goal. I'm just not sure if we've got the system at the moment to get there.
Is it difficult in itself because you've already got somewhere like Norwich, which is a wonderful medieval city, and it has an infrastructure, and you have a lot of things in place already to kind of redevelop that and change that, because you're talking about having people walk somewhere to go to work. Well, actually, it's everything coming together, isn't it? You have to change the whole thing, so it's not something going to change overnight, is it? 2 or 3 years down the line. This is a 10, 20, 30-year plan, isn't it?
100%, and some of our oldest cities, they're the ones most difficult to change. The chair of ATCM is the CEO of Canterbury Bid, and we talk about this challenge all the time. Conservation area, it's really difficult. It's really difficult, but unless we need that investment and that plan to get there, and it's got to be done, because getting it right, it solves so many issues. You think of creating a place where people can get to work via active travel. You think about the health and well-being benefits of that, issues around climate change, issue around access to skills for those businesses, resilience to the pandemic, because ultimately people not travelling in is not a problem. They already live in the city. It solves so many things if we get it right. So it's worth getting it done.
Absolutely. Sorry, I selfishly asked the question there. Yeah, Hayley.
Just in terms of, I think the thing that we forget is that Norwich, because of its size, even if you've not got people in the city centre, it's still so accessible in that sense. So it's not, the challenge that we have isn't perhaps as extreme. When you have people that live in Manchester, in London, certainly the guys that, we now work with over in Tel Aviv, they accept that their commute to work is an hour and a half. That's normal for a lot of people. We don't ever have to have that. I'm moaning and bitching about the fact that it took me 50 minutes to get here today. It would never take me that long to get to work. And I do live outside of the city. And so I do think if we can just make it easier for people to live outside of the city but access the city, then there's so many areas, lovely areas outside of Norwich for people that they don't even know it exists, to come and live, and they would still have this really nice commute into work that they certainly wouldn't have elsewhere.
I think it's interesting what you were saying earlier, Hayley, that you've got people that live in Cromer and Sheringham 25 miles away, and I know friends who live up there and they never come into the city because it's a long way. Sorry, Bill, you had a point there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the broader aspect of all of this is that, and I'm going to talk to the bid now, because I turned it off. Sorry. Turned it off. Yeah, that's a good way.
Silence, Bill.
Hello. No. My wife would like to learn from you. I just want to talk about the broader aspect of this whole thing in terms of the context of a bid, because I'm a great advocate that the bid model, albeit it's been very successful since its introduction in the mid-noughties, I think it was, as an import from America, by the way, needs to evolve, and it needs to evolve into a community improvement district and broaden the aspect. And I know you're doing that in in Norwich. You've got the education people sitting on your board, yeah? But it really is important that you go beyond just the businesses and engage with all of the influencers, and that will be a good platform, including the local authority, to use as a way of addressing it as a collegiate group. And so in one of the reviews, in fact, the last 3 reviews, we've advocated that the bid, national bid conferences, they should now try and move the model on to a broader community improvement district, which will provide that platform.
Great, thank you, Bill. Who's got another question? Anyone else waiting? This gentleman here. Anyone specifically for this question?
No, it's a sort of more of a comment than a question, really, but I'm sure there'll be an answer or two. Norwich is definitely moving in the right direction. There's absolutely no doubt about that in terms of its transport policy, its housing policy, and every policy that is on the books. But I just wonder whether the biggest barrier to our success is going to be a lack of creativity. And it sort of comes back to Bill's point about leadership. I don't see the creativity in the city's leadership. And, I look at planning decisions that have been made, like St Anne's Quarter. Perfect opportunity to revitalise the city, but we build more flats, nothing else. There's a whole raft of buildings along the river, and the river is the heart of the city. We're at one end of one of the major national parks. I see 6 boats, if I'm lucky, in a day come into Norwich. I know there's plans for the Carrow site to be part of Marina, but it's too far out. It's not in the city centre. My point is there isn't enough creativity in the decision-making, and where's that going to come from?
Stephen, can you pick up on that one? I think you're fairly well versed to pick up on this.
Look, I disagree. Look at East Norwich. East Norwich is the biggest regeneration opportunity in the country, one of the biggest in Europe. And we've got to drive that forward. And we're putting the foundations in place to drive that forward. 6,000 new homes, 4,000 new jobs, a whole new quarter for the city, picking up many of the things and the themes that we've touched on today. You know, I've been here 18 months. If I can leave with schemes like East Norwich and other regen opportunities having a real firm footing, then I'll be happy. So I don't think there's a lack of vision. I think, like everywhere, there is more we can do, and there's more areas where we can join up. But actually, if you look up, I think you do see that vision. So let's get behind it and push it forward.
What would be the answer then? I mean, if we're talking about you were saying that you got 4 boats coming in, and we are blessed with wonderful rivers, and we're on the edge of the Broads, and we have all that here on our doorstep. You know, do we create the Norwich Riviera? I mean, is there something that can be done there? Because there is all that area that's
part of the East Norwich.
Yeah, that's all happening.
You know, and that's starting. We've got the partnership in place. We're out to consult at the moment. So get engaged.
And more paddleboarders, thank goodness. I mean, everyone's paddleboarding these days. Any more questions for the... Yes, sorry, right behind me. So that...
I totally agree that there has to be a long-term vision, long-term planning, 20 years, 5 years, 10 years. Sometimes opportunities come up very quickly, and so within that planning and the collaboration, there has to be the ability to react to things a lot quicker. And I suppose I'm specifically thinking about our lovely Royal Arcade in Norwich. You know, it's been owned by a fund for 30 plus years. It's gone through successes, it's dipped, it's probably at its lowest point now. Everyone talks about feeling very passionate about the Royal Arcade, what's going to happen. It's going into an auction. It will be sold on Friday, I assume, unless L&G decide to pull it. But so I guess I'm saying, is there flexibility within all this planning for the council, the bid, everybody to come together at a very short notice and think, we need to do something about that, and we need to do it now.
Absolutely. I think as well, I think what you're saying as well is we often hear of the passion, but the passion needs to be turned into action, isn't it? So people will say they're passionate about a certain part of the city, and that is the historical and a fabulous heritage part of the city. So is that something that can happen? Can we swoop in and things be kind of saved?
Yeah, look, so not to think about the Royal Arcade specifically. You know, where there is a market failure, then there has to be someone to step in. You know, in most cases the market will take over, and in most cases it will do it quite well. But as part of our Townsdeal fund, a multi-million-pound fund, as part of that called the revolving fund, which is there precisely to unlock those parcels of land where there is a market failure, perhaps because they've just been sat for a number of years. Where we can, with partners, step in and drive that forward. So that is a big part of our thinking, and hopefully it will become a reality now we've got the funding available.
Okay, lovely, thank you. I think we've got time for just one more question. Is that one more? Yeah, one more. Please, you, sir.
Thank you. As a city which has consistently been in the top 2 or 3 of places in Britain in terms of the RSA's Heritage Index, and has been described as one of the most complete medieval cities in Northern Europe, how important does the panel think heritage is in terms of being a springboard for that creative and inspirational future we've talked about today?
Well, Bill's saying huge. I can read his lips from here, so I'm just going to give him a microphone to start things off with that one. Thank you.
I think the important thing to say is that curating space is a very important and responsible job. And being the custodian of place is where it starts. And the custodian of place is the local authority. You hold the planning keys. And my challenge is, have you the plan that's based on heritage to make Norwich even more unique in the future? Because if you don't have that plan, then please go ahead and try and get it now. And if you do have that plan, then everybody should get behind it, and if the community's behind it, and implement it. It's absolutely heritage-led is so important. Okay.
Is there the plan? There we are, the question.
I mean, all I would say to that is it cannot be the council's plan. It needs to be a plan for the city that we all buy into. So
politicians are.
No, it's not. So we've got levers. Absolutely, we've got levers, but we don't hold all the cards, and you know that. So it's got to be a plan for the city.
You are the custodians of place, unquestionably. You control planning. So step up and own it. That's the challenge. I say this wherever I go. Burst out of your butt and say, yeah, we own it, and get all these people in this room to get behind you and support you. It's as simple as that. But heritage is absolutely.
So if it's not down to the council, who is it down to? Obviously, the council is part of that, but who else is it down to?
If I pick in Glasgow, Liverpool, Cork, European cities of culture, which actually had that huge culture-led regeneration, that was broad community facilitated and pulled together by local authorities there. I can think of another example. People may be aware of Halifax, the Peace Hall, which on the casting vote of the mayor back in the 1950s, the council didn't get round to knocking down. So the culture, once you lose it, it's gone. And it does take everybody's. The council has a role to play, as in, you talked about Andy Street, Burnham, big characters, Chamberlain in Birmingham, you people who can lead their communities and who need the individuals who need that vision.
Let's be clear, if you, as the local authority, do not take the lead to bring people together and curate a plan around the heritage and the future for Norwich, it won't happen.
I don't think anyone's disagreeing with you. I'm certainly not. We've got to play a leading role, but actually what I don't want this to be is Norwich City Council's plan for the city. That would be a disaster. It needs to be... So I think we're saying the same thing.
I was going to say, I would also go in support of what Stephen's saying. Actually, there is a very clear set plan, the 2040 vision, which I think we were about over there when we all pulled it together, and it involved young people, so not just the grey suits and the collective business community. It involved wider community, it involved the business community, the leaders, it involved the city, the county, and we have that, and now we're seeing that other parties are coming towards to pull that together. So the bid is now also tying its 2040 vision its vision for the next strategy into that 2040 framework as well, so that we are having that cohesion for the city, because we can see that, as we talked about earlier, and the challenge on how do we get funding from central government to do it, if everyone is on the same page and pulling in the same way, we've been able to be the first city to unlock Townsdeal because of that relationship that we've had between the community, the businesses, the local authorities, the education providers, and lots of different communities. We are one of the most cohesive cities in the UK, and that's allowed us to access funding that others haven't. I know we're one of the fast growth cities. I know Alan, as the leader of the City Council, talks about that. There are lots of these national sort of forums that we are exemplars in, and we are doing that. So I think there needs to be a reflection on actually how well and how collaboratively we are working. I think the challenge of today was never rest on your laurels, never be the person that is just sat there not thinking about what can be next. And I think there's a good challenge from Carol there about there will be things that get thrown in on a yearly basis that we would never have anticipated coming. Global pandemic never would have been anticipated, the change in retail being as fast as it is. But the city has a good vision, and the city is continuing to challenge itself, and hence why we've been able to bring the leader of the county, the leader of the city council here, to be able to talk to the business community, because they are open to that. They are not hidden in an ivory tower, not getting engaged to it, because they want to hear what businesses want. They want to hear what the community wants. So it is a good open dialogue, and hopefully all of us will take away from today some of the thoughts that you've provoked, that OJ's provoked, the challenges that we've got here, because these will help our thinking as we start to look at the next 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, 2040. I think these are the things, and I saw everyone scribbling down lots of notes because it was a really thought-provoking piece that will be brilliant to allow us to challenge ourselves for the future of it.
Stefan, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've got one very brief one. Very brief. Good shout.
I think it's just an observation of the conversation. Actually, I think this is about engagement. So I think we've got a really good vision. We've got lots of stakeholders, and the word community often gets thrown around. The community changes and moves on, different ages, different people, different subcategories of different areas of the city. And very much we create a very structured piece, which is we engage here, and we'll engage here, and we'll engage here. It needs to flow a lot more. And you know, as an example, the Health and Social Care Engagement Officer at Norfolk County Council is one of them. The entire county of Norfolk in a crisis. So I think we need to rethink how we get that connection, because I sit in the middle of that as a BCSE organisation trying to translate all this stuff to Mrs. Bloggins, who's 89. She doesn't know what the vision is. So how do we get that connection? And that's a challenge, and we all need to work together to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everyone's definition of community is different, isn't it, as well? And as you say, it can move, and it moves constantly, doesn't it? So while the focus may be on, you know, the redevelopment of East Norwich, you know, the focus is there. But of course, you've got to make sure that we have a cohesive focus as well. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, can we put our hands together for our fabulous panel? Very quick summary from me. I've been one of the people scribbling stuff down. I thought I'd be kind of, you know, regurgitating some of it and using it as questions, but stuff I can take away certainly with my role and what I do for a living as well. So I should be coming to all of you for stories at some point, I'm sure. But hopefully it's been an informative morning, and you've got something out of it, or a lot out of it. I think as well we should say thank you to Norwich Bid as well for putting the effort into making sure that we could all be together. Let's hope this continues. Hope we can carry on seeing each other in the flesh, and we're not seeing each other on a screen in the future. We can kind of carry on doing this kind of thing. I know there's lunch in a minute. I imagine some of our guests might be hanging around for a quick conversation if anybody's got more questions. But I suppose, you know, we do live in a fabulous city. As I say, I moved here 20 years ago, and I'm always amazed and in awe of the wonderful people that make up Norwich. It's a very fabulous city. Everyone feels very proud to live here, very proud to come to work here, very proud to be part of the community, part of the fabric of the city. But of course, we can't rest on our laurels. There's always stuff to do. If we think we've reached the destination, then that's where we run into trouble. So I know that, you know, you are wonderful people. This is your livelihood, your industry, and you'll continue to make Norwich what it is. So thank you very much for what you do for the city. And yes, I will. They probably want to grab something to eat first, but anyway, thank you all very much for coming to Norwich this morning, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.